The earth remembers what men try to forget. Beneath the grass, beneath the stones, beneath the rivers that flow like veins through the land, there are whispers. Whispers of screams, of running feet, of drums that stopped beating too soon. Have you ever wondered why some stories are carved into monuments, while others vanish into silence? Why we learn about battles fought far away, yet the tragedies that happened right here, on this soil, are missing from our books. This is one of those stories. A massacre buried in shadows, a truth wrapped in silence, as if history itself was ashamed to speak it aloud. The people who lived it carried it in their blood, in their songs, in the smoke of their fires, but outsiders wrote it out, erased it, tried to scatter it like ashes in the wind. But the land remembers, the wind remembers, and tonight, we will remember too. Picture a village long ago, lit only by firelight. Children laugh near the tipis. Hunters return with deer across their shoulders. Elders speak softly of dreams and spirits. All seems peaceful, as if nothing could break this circle of life. Yet far beyond the tree line, a storm is gathering. Promises made are about to be broken. Trust is about to be shattered, and the people in that village, men, women, children, do not know that their lives hang by a thread. The question is not only what happened that night. The question is why it was erased. Who wanted it silenced? And what does it mean for us, sitting here generations later, when we realize that if this story could vanish, how many others have already been lost? The fire crackles, the wind sighs, and so we begin. The forgotten massacre that history tried to erase. Before the guns, before the broken treaties, before the betrayal, there was life, full, rich, and unshaken. The land was alive with sound, rivers rushing like songs, elk calling across the valleys, eagles riding the wind. The people moved with this rhythm, never above it, never apart from it. Their homesteads painted with symbols of dreams, and visions stood in circles, like stars arranged by human hands. Each circle was a universe of kinship, where every child belonged to many mothers, and every elder carried the memory of 100 winters. Imagine the smell of buffalo meat, roasting over the fire, the sound of children racing barefoot through grass wet with morning dew, warriors sharpening arrowheads not for conquest, but for survival. In those days, survival was not separate from spirit, it was guided by it. The people prayed, not in churches of stone, but under endless skies. Their altar was the earth itself. When they sang, the wind carried their voices. When they danced, the ground trembled with them. Every sunrise was a gift, every hunt a test of gratitude. Outsiders would later write of these people as primitive. But tell me, what is primitive about living in balance? What is primitive about knowing how to read the stars, the tracks in the soil, the shifting moods of the seasons? These were not simple lives. They were lives rooted in wisdom that modern eyes have forgotten. But peace, no matter how strong, is always fragile. Beyond the horizon, other forces were moving. Traders came first, with bright trinkets and sharp blades. Then soldiers, with uniforms and flags. Words were spoken, promises made, yet promises can be broken as easily as dry twigs underfoot. Still, in the village, on that final day before the storm, none of this shadow touched their laughter. The hunters planned the next buffalo run. The women prepared hides for winter clothing. The elders spoke of the ancestors who walked beside them, unseen but never absent. Life was as it had always been, yet history teaches us that the moment before disaster often feels the most peaceful. If you stood in that village, listening to the crackle of fire, would you sense it? Would you hear the warning hidden in the wind? Or would you, like them, believe that tomorrow would be the same as today? The circle of life still turned, but far away, a hand had already reached to break it. Some stories are carved into stone, others vanish like smoke. Why? Who decides which truths are remembered and which are buried? The story you're about to hear is one that history tried to erase. A massacre hidden in silence, as if too shameful to speak aloud. There are no monuments for it, no grand lessons in the classroom, yet the land remembers. The rivers remember, and in the whispers of the wind, the blood of the past still speaks. Imagine a village before dawn. The sky is painted gray, the fires still glowing faint in the center of a circle of tipis. Children breathe softly in sleep. Hunters rest, their bows leaning against the hide walls. The people dream, unaware that their names are already slipping into shadows. From the outside, this world seemed unshakable, strong, rooted, balanced with the earth itself. But beyond the tree line, something darker stirred. Promises had been broken, trust had been twisted, and now, footsteps moved closer. Footsteps that would soon turn a peaceful village into a place of blood and silence. What happened here was not just violence. It was an attempt to destroy memory itself, to strike not only at the living, but at the story of their existence. And for generations, silence covered what the fire once saw. But silence cannot last forever. The soil where people fell still holds their cries. The wind still carries the truth. And tonight, that truth returns to Firelight. The forgotten massacre is not gone. It waits for someone to listen, and now you are here. Before the storm, there was harmony. The land stretched wide and alive, a living heart beating beneath the feet of its people. Rivers curved like silver serpents, carrying fish and songs down to the valleys. Forests stood thick with pine and oak, their branches heavy with the cries of birds. In the open plains, buffalo moved like thunder, their hooves shaping the very rhythm of life. In the center of this world stood the village. Tipis rose in circles, painted with colors that spoke of dreams and visions, soaring eagles, rising suns, sacred animals. At night, the hides glowed with firelight, each flicker carrying warmth, each shadow holding the weight of stories. Here, every breath was part of a larger rhythm. Hunters returned with deer across their shoulders, laughter echoing as children raced barefoot through grass still wet with morning dew. Women prepared hides for clothing, carved tools from bone, and stirred stews that carried the smell of earth and smoke. Elders sat near the fire, their voices weaving myths of creation, teaching how every star, every tree, every stone was alive with spirit. To outsiders, these lives might have seemed simple, but nothing was simple here. The people knew the constellations well enough to travel by them. They knew which plants healed, which poisoned, which could be mixed into paint or medicine. They read the prints of animals in the soil like sentences in a book. This was knowledge written not on paper, but in memory, in spirit, in survival. Life was hard, yes, but it was steady, balanced, and within that balance was strength. Yet balance is always fragile. Far beyond the circle of Tipis, whispers stirred. Traders had brought steel, whiskey, and promises that shone bright but rang hollow. Rumors drifted like smoke of soldiers moving closer, of land already claimed in ink and signatures the people had never made. These were distant storms, easily ignored on nights when drums carried songs into the stars. But the people did not yet know. Storms travel fast, and so, in those final days of peace, the village carried on as it always had. A mother rocked her child to sleep. A warrior sharpened his arrowhead, thinking only of the next hunt. The council spoke of the next season's journey, never imagining that the journey ahead would not be one of migration, but of survival. If you stood there, in that firelit circle, could you feel it? Could you sense the shadow already reaching across the land? The world was still whole, but the first cracks had begun to form. To live upon the land was not simply to survive, was to belong. Every stream, every hill, every gust of wind carried meaning. The people did not see the earth as something to conquer. They saw it as a partner, a teacher, a spirit that gave only if you learned how to listen. Take the buffalo, For example, it was more than an animal, it was life itself. From its flesh came food to feed the village. From its hide came clothing, bedding, and the walls of tipis. From its bones came tools, knives, and even children's toys. Nothing was wasted, for to waste was to insult the spirit of the buffalo. When the hunt ended, prayers rose with the smoke, thanking the creature that had given its life so others could live. Along the rivers, men cast nets woven from plant fibers, their eyes trained on the ripples that betrayed a fish's path. Women gathered roots and berries, careful to leave enough behind so that the earth would grow them again. Even the smallest things, wild onions, cattail stalks, pine needles steeped in hot water where knowledge passed down like treasure. And then there were the shelters, the tipis that stood like proud mountains of hide and wood, ingeniously built. They could be raised in an hour, sturdy against wind, cool in summer, warm in winter. Smoke from fires rose through an opening at the top, carrying prayers with it to the sky. These were not simple tents, as outsiders once wrote, but marvels of design, portable, strong, sacred. Children grew up inside this living classroom. They learned how to track deer by the bend of a blade of grass, how to tell time by the angle of the sun, how to measure seasons by the stars. Every day carried lessons that no book could teach, and every lesson carried weight, for in this world, ignorance meant death. Yet survival was not only about skill, it was about respect. The people believed that if you took too much, if you forgot gratitude, the earth would turn against you. A failed hunt, a harsh winter, a sickness in the tribe, these were reminders that balance must never be broken. Life was demanding, yes, but it was not cruel. It was a constant dance with nature, and as long as the people moved with the rhythm of that dance, the circle held strong. But circles can be broken, and soon, survival would mean something very different. When the day's work was done and the hunts complete, the people turned toward the fire. There, in the glow of flames, the village found its true heartbeat. Storytelling was not entertainment, it was survival of another kind. Around the fire, elders spoke of creation, of the first people who emerged from the earth, of the animals who once walked as equals beside humans. Each tale carried a lesson. A child might hear a story of Coyote, the trickster, and laugh, but hidden in that laughter was wisdom. Never take more than you need. Never boast too loudly. Never forget respect. The fire was the library. The drumbeat was the language, and memory was the only book. Every story carried the weight of generations, passed down not in ink, but in living breath. Rituals filled the seasons. In the spring, dances called for renewal, feet striking the earth to wake it from its sleep. In summer, ceremonies gave thanks for the hunts, with feathers and paint marking warriors in bright colors of red, black, and yellow. In winter, when the snow sealed the world in silence, songs rose inside the lodges, echoing the warmth of community against the cold. Kinship stretched beyond blood. A child did not belong to just one mother or father, the village was their family. Grandmothers whispered old songs to infants, uncles taught boys to carve arrows, aunts taught girls to prepare medicines from roots. Every hand was guiding another, every heart tied to the circle. No one stood alone. Above all, the people believed in balance. The world was not split into good and evil, but woven together like strands of a web. The sun and moon, the predator and prey, the storm and the camal were necessary. To honor this, ceremonies carried smoke upward, rising like prayers to the sky. Dancers painted in sacred colors moved in circles, echoing the endless cycle of life itself. Imagine the sound of drums rolling like thunder under a star-filled sky. Children wide-eyed, watching warriors leap and chant. The scent of sage smoke curling into the night air. These were not moments of spectacle. They were acts of survival, of keeping the spirit alive. In those nights, with stars above and drums below, the people felt unbreakable. Their ancestors walked beside them, Their traditions bound them like sinew to bone. But even the strongest traditions can be tested, and soon, the stories told by the fire would not be of tricksters or creation, they would be of survival against shadows that threatened to silence the fire itself. Long before disaster touches the earth, the world gives warnings. But do we listen? The first signs were small, almost easy to ignore. Hunters noticed that the buffalo moved differently. Herds that once thundered across the plains now lingered near the riverbanks, restless, circling without reason. Deer that usually darted through the forest froze at the sight of shadows, their ears twitching, their eyes wide with fear. Even the birds seemed uneasy. The calls of the crows grew louder, sharper, as if they were announcing something unseen. The people knew these were not accidents. Animals often felt what humans could not. They were messengers, and their behavior was a language older than any spoken word. Then came the wind. It carried whispers soft, unsettling. Women gathering water heard it in the reeds, a sound like distant crying. Warriors on the ridges felt it in sudden gusts that chilled their bones, though the sun still shone above. The elders said the wind was restless, carrying warnings from the ancestors. Shamans were called to listen. They burned sage, letting the smoke rise, watching how it curled. They fasted, seeking visions, and the visions came, heavy with fire and blood. One spoke of a circle breaking, of children's voices, cut short. Another described a river running red, as if the water itself would mourn. These were not just dreams. They were messages carried from the spirit world to the living. At night, the village grew uneasy. Dogs barked at the empty dark. The stars seemed sharper, almost too bright, staring down like eyes filled with sorrow. Mothers pulled their children close, whispering prayers before sleep. Warriors kept their weapons nearer than usual, though they could not yet name the enemy. And yet life continued. The fires still burned. The drums still echoed. People wanted to believe that the omens were only warnings for someone else, somewhere else. After all, how could danger touch a people who lived in balance with the world? But balance can be broken not only by those who honor it, but by those who do not. The animals had seen it. The wind had carried it. The shamans had spoken of it. Still, the question lingered. Would the people act before the storm arrived, or would they be caught in silence when it struck? The night was growing heavier, and the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Betrayal does not fall like lightning, it creeps. Slow and silent, like frost spreading across a window. At first, it is almost invisible. Then, suddenly, everything is cracked. The first cracks came with promises. Outsiders spoke words heavy with honey. Peace, trade, friendship. They came carrying gifts, bright beads, iron knives, muskets. They shook hands, smoked pipes, swore oaths by the fire. For a moment, trust seemed possible, but words spoken in smoke dissolved quickly. The treaties were written in ink, not in spirit. Where the people saw land as sacred and shared, the outsiders saw it as property to divide, to sell, to claim as their own. One paper after another marked rivers, forests, hunting grounds stolen with strokes of a pen the people had never held. Alliances grew uneasy. Some tribes, hoping to survive, tried to work with the outsiders. Others warned against it, saying the gifts were poisoned, the words hollow. Suspicion spread like wildfire, not only between tribes and newcomers, but among the people themselves. Who could be trusted? Who had already bargained away the future? The shadow deepened when food grew scarce. Buffalo herds, once endless, began to vanish. Some said the outsiders were slaughtering them wastefully, leaving carcasses to rot in the sun. Others believed it was punishment from the spirits, angered at the breaking of promises. Either way, hunger sharpened every fear. The elders spoke of caution. They remembered old visions, warnings that peace with those who did not honor the earth would not last. But younger warriors grew restless. Rage burned in them at the sight of soldiers marching closer, building forts on land that had never been theirs. The betrayal was not only in treaties, ignored it, was in silence. The outsiders spoke of peace, yet behind closed doors they planned attacks. They smiled at the council fire, then sharpened their blades in the dark. Whispers spread through the village like sickness. Had scouts seen soldiers nearby? Were traders carrying more than goods in their wagons? Perhaps secrets, perhaps maps of the land. Every shadow seemed longer, every stranger's smile a little too sharp. Betrayal is a slow poison, and by the time you taste its bitterness, it has already spread through your blood. The people still sang their songs. They still danced beneath the stars. But the laughter was thinner now, the joy fragile. Everyone knew something was coming, though no one could yet name its shape, and so, suspicion hung heavy, like storm clouds rolling in from the horizon. The circle was beginning to fracture. When the circle weakens, the spirits do not stay silent. They speak, though not always in ways the living wish to hear. One night, as the drums faded and the fire burned low, an elder named Viaka sat alone. His hair was white as winter snow, his eyes dark as the night sky. For 3 days he had fasted, drinking only water, listening to the whispers of the wind. He sought clarity, but clarity often arrives with pain. That night, the fire shifted strangely. Its flames twisted upward, curling into shapes that did not belong to wood or smoke. Viaka's eyes widened as visions filled the blaze. He saw warriors running, not in victory, but in retreat. He saw mothers clutching their children, faces streaked with ash. He saw rivers turning red, carrying the cries of the fallen downstream. Then came the ancestors. Their voices rose from the crackling wood, layered like 100 echoes. The circle is breaking. Beware the fire that does not warm. Beware the hand that smiles and then strikes. Viaka trembled. In the flames, he saw soldiers in lines, their rifles flashing like lightning. He saw the buffalo, once countless, lying in heaps across the plains, lifeless eyes staring at the sky. And over it all, a shadow loomed, larger than any man, something colder, hungrier. A shadow that did not come to trade or to share, but to erase. The vision ended as suddenly as it began. The fire sank low, leaving only embers. But Viaka was no longer the same. His heart carried the weight of what he had seen. The next morning, he spoke before the people. His voice was hoarse, his body frail, but his words struck deep. "The fire has shown me blood," he said. "The ancestors cry out. We must prepare, for what is coming is not friendship, is death disguised in smiles." Some listened with solemn faces, fear etched in their eyes. Others shook their heads, unwilling to believe. Visions could be warnings, yes, but they could also be shaped by hunger, exhaustion, the wandering mind of an old man. Yet in the days that followed, the signs grew harder to ignore. Strange riders appeared on the horizon. Traders asked questions that felt more like spying, and always, the animals remained restless, refusing to linger near the village. Visions can be doubted, but they cannot be erased. Once spoken, they linger in every mind like smoke after a fire. And so the people waited, torn between disbelief and dread, as the shadow Viaka had seen drew closer with every sunrise. War does not arrive all at once. It grows, like a drumbeat, in the distance, soft at first, then louder, until it consumes the air itself. The vision of Viaka spread through the village like sparks on dry grass. Some dismissed it, but most could not shake the unease in their bones. Every sound seemed sharper, now the crack of a branch, the cry of a hawk, the echo of hooves across the plains. Scouts returned with grim news. Strangers had been seen riding not far from the hunting grounds, soldiers in rows, wagons heavy with supplies, rifles glinting in the sun. Forts had been built closer, their wooden walls cutting into the horizon like scars. And worse, the buffalo herds had nearly vanished. Without food, without strength, How could the people stand against such numbers? The council gathered. Fires burned high, casting long shadows as warriors spoke with voices tight with anger. Some argued for striking first, to show strength before the enemy advanced. Others urged caution, saying the spirits might yet guide them to peace. But the truth hung heavy. There would be no peace. The treaties were lies. The promises were smoke. The outsiders came not for friendship, but for the land itself. So preparations began. Arrows were sharpened, spears repaired. Young men who had never known battle were taught to move like shadows, to strike swiftly and vanish. Women gathered food stores, dried meat, and prepared hides for protection. Even children carried water, fetched stones, and listened wide-eyed as elders whispered instructions for survival. But in every heart was the same knowledge. Their numbers were few. For every warrior in the village, the enemy could send 10, maybe 20. For every bow, the outsiders carried rifles that could kill at a distance. It was like standing before a flood with only a small wall of stones. At night, the drums began, slow, steady, echoing across the valley. They were not only for practice, they were prayers in rhythm, voices sent into the dark. The people danced with heavy feet, their movements carrying both defiance and fear. The drums said, "We are still here. We will not surrender without a fight." Yet, behind the songs, a deeper silence lingered. Mothers held their children longer at night. Elders watched the horizon with hollow eyes. Even the bravest warriors felt the truth clawing at their hearts. The drums beat louder. The shadows drew closer, and the sense of doom deepened with every passing night. Like thunder rolling just beyond the ridge. The storm was no longer coming. It was here. The day began, like any other. Smoke curled from the tipis, children laughed as they chased each other through the grass, and hunters prepared to leave for the plains. The sky was wide and clear, deceptively calm. No one knew that by nightfall. The village would be drenched in silence and blood. It began with the sound hooves on the horizon, pounding like distant thunder. At first, some thought it was buffalo returning, but the scouts knew better. Dust rose in a line across the ridge, not in the wild pattern of animals, but in the hard, steady march of soldiers. The warning cry went up. Warriors grabbed bows, spears, whatever weapons they had. Mothers pulled children inside the tipis. Elders clutched their medicine bundles, whispering hurried prayers. But there was no time. The circle of the village was already closing in. Soldiers surrounded them on all sides. Rifles gleamed, bayonets flashed. Shouts rang out in a foreign tongue, sharp and merciless. The people raised their hands, some calling for peace, for truce, for reason. But reason had long since left this place. The first shot cracked through the air, then another. Chaos erupted. Warriors rushed forward, arrows flying, but arrows could not reach as far or strike as fast as bullets. One by one they fell, bodies crumpling into the dirt. Women tried to shield their children, pulling them close, but bayonets tore through flesh as easily as cloth. The screams of the young mixed with the cries of the dying, until the air itself seemed to bleed. Some tried to flee toward the river. Soldiers chased them down, cutting them off, cutting them down. The water ran dark, carrying their last breaths away. Others hid in tipis, only for fire to be set to the hides. Flames consumed the painted walls, consuming stories, consuming memory. The air filled with smoke and ash, a storm of death swallowing everything. Through it all, drums still sounded faint, desperate, as if the heartbeat of the people refused to die. A warrior, pierced by bullets, struck the drum one last time before falling. The sound echoed across the plain, not of defeat, but of defiance. By nightfall, silence reigned. The fires smoldered, the tipis lay in ruin, and the earth was heavy with blood. An entire circle of life had been broken, shattered by hands that had promised peace. The soldiers did not stay to mourn. They left quickly, leaving behind only ashes, bodies, and a silence they believed would erase the memory forever. But the land does not forget. The soil still holds the cries of the children. The river still carries the sorrow of the mothers. The wind still whispers the names of the warriors who fell. History may have tried to erase this massacre, but the earth itself has kept the record for generations. The story lived in whispers, in the trembling voice of an elder, in the songs sung softly when strangers could not hear. Not written in books, not carved into monuments, but carried in blood, in memory, in spirit. This was the forgotten massacre, forgotten by those who chose silence, remembered by those who refused to let silence win. And now, you remember too. The massacre ended lives, but it did not end memory. A few survived children carried into hiding by mothers, elders shielded by fallen bodies, warriors who crawled away under cover of smoke. They bore scars too deep for the eye to see, but they carried something even heavier than wounds, the responsibility to remember. In the years that followed, when the soldiers wrote their reports, the story was twisted. Some details were so